2, 1. Welcome to the Crossroadz, the show where we provide you the tools to break boundaries, reach new frontiers, and unlock your greatest life. I'm your host, Kai, and today, you guys, we have a very, very special guest that I've been waiting to talk to for a very long time. We're currently, if you can see on video, we're currently inside Kinjaz complex in the Vibrvncy section. And if you don't know what Kinjaz are yet, somehow, then they are a collective group of dancers that I've been following for a very long time, since 2010. They've been leading the charge for choreography dance, for breaking and hip-hop and all types of structures in this art and creation and combining dance with all other types of art. And the person I'm sitting next to right now has done a phenomenal job of doing this. And he's super humble, so he doesn't get the chance to talk about himself very much, but his art speaks for him, his voice, like all throughout. If you ever seen Kinjaz or any type of Vibrvncy work or anything within the dance world, chances are that he's touched it somehow. He's a graphic designer, interior designer, costume designer, designers of so many different things and trades. The medium does not restrict him. He's also just an amazing, humble, and kind person. Jon Shih, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate you for your time, man.
Thanks for having me, man.
Of course. No, I'm super excited to get into this. It was not that long ago, maybe about a year and a half, when I first met you. Actually, before that, I met you briefly in Shanghai, but after that, I hit you up on Instagram, and you were kind enough to just allow me into your home, and we talked for a little bit. You shared a little bit about yourself and the things you've done, and that was the first time I'd really gotten a chance to peer into the mind of your hardworking and very there's a lot of things mind, right? Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk about was how, I guess, you got started. So as opposed to an origin story, I remember that you told me breaking was one of the very first things dance-wise that you were involved in. So I want to hear a little bit more about that. And then I also know that there was an accident that you had that kind of changed things for you. But let's start there. How did dance even become a part of your life in the first place?
Yeah, so through like middle school, high school, I was active in Taekwondo. So I think the interest in movement actually came from martial arts. And then in college, I was sort of introduced via YouTube, the breaking world, and like things like Red Bull BC1, and that's also when sort of the dance shows started to appear on TV, and it was just sort of that time frame that I sort of saw like, oh, this is a thing, and there were certain people that did come from martial arts background, that were specifically into breaking. Right. People like Nagin, right, or yes, even like some of the Quest Crew guys.
Yeah.
So seeing that sort of hybrid in terms of creativity and movement and sort of the cross-section of things that were happening there was really interesting to me. So that's why I started like trying to learn how to break. And I grew up in upstate New York. It's not like there was a huge scene there, just a couple people at my high school that were into it. So we'd just meet up in the gym, like after school and stuff, and session. I'd be learning from videos or from the people around me, and that sort of continued into college.
Gotcha. Yeah, I feel that actually, and I remember you mentioning that. It's crazy because the first thing I started doing movement-wise was also Taekwondo. I was 6, and I get that bridge, right? That connection where you learn a roundhouse kick, and then that same kick will take you places in breaking, right? Okay, so we know your background like dance-wise. So how did that connect to the arts that you do today? When you were a kid, did you have any tendencies artistically growing up? What were your favorite things to do?
Yeah, I mean, I was always sort of into like visual art. So my mom tells me I was like drawing pictures when I was 4 of like dinosaurs or like sea creatures or something. So that's kind of been the line that is drawn from like back then till now. It's like I've always had some sort of interest in art, and like you mentioned, sort of the mediums have kind of like transformed and manifested in different ways, but the interest has always been there, and yeah, I guess it stems from that. I don't know, crayon
the simple
drawing,
thing.
like
Okay,
yeah.
got you. So then you ended up going to school for design, correct? So what was that decision? How was that process? And yeah, how did you end up picking Syracuse? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. I think I was on sort of a different pathway, partially because I think my parents would have preferred a different route.
Right. Yeah.
And so I really didn't know or think that I was going to go for art until my senior year of high school. And that's also because that summer before that year, I entered like a summer art program that was sort of like a fast track to the AP art class at my school. So if I hadn't taken that summer course, I couldn't take the AP art course.
Gotcha.
But I did, and because I'd missed sort of like the prerequisite art classes that you should take before that. But because I took that summer course and the teacher was the AP art teacher, he allowed me to take the class for my senior year. And I did well on the art exam at the end of the year, and that got me a little bit of a scholarship into Syracuse.
Oh, okay.
So that was part of the reasoning there.
Got you.
Yeah.
What made you, so you took this intensive summer class, and why did you decide to sign up for that? Do you remember?
I think it was really just like, man, I know I'm decent at this. I know I'm interested in art. Don't know what else I would do in the summer. And I think I had talked to the art teacher at some point before then, and he was like, if you take this, maybe you can take the class. So that factored into it. Yeah, I don't know. I just think that it felt like I should do something about it because it had sort of been dormant, right? Like
Right.
I was drawing and stuff, but I didn't have like career goals out of it.
Gotcha.
So taking the class and then doing well in the exam made me feel like, okay, maybe this is a possible route to take for myself and also for my parents. So yeah.
Got you. So yeah, it was filling some of the criteria, right? And
Yeah.
in a time when maybe a lot of kids in high school don't know what they want to do, right? It's like not uncommon, especially like, I mean, it was the same for me. And the only reason I ended up going to school, and I went to school for film, was because that was my second choice next to mechanical engineering, but my math scores weren't good enough. So they ended up, they're like, okay, we can't accept you for this because your math scores suck. But your second choice was film, and like, okay, you can go for that. So that ended up happening, but because of that, it was because I decided to even put that down. Sometimes we happen to do things on a whim, and they lead us somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And things just happen. Sometimes you pick things for a reason. So
Right.
it was that choice you decided to take. How did dance end up becoming more? And how did you end up going into this field? Because right now, from what you've told us, it's art, right? And then you danced. So there's these two things. How did they start to converge?
Yeah, so I think the general sort of interest in art, like, also I played piano since I was young, so I think dance already by itself looked like this hybrid of visual art, music, movement, these things that, like, for me stem from drawing and taekwondo and piano. It's like, wow, these things can all be represented in some way by this medium called dance. And interest level wise, that's what really made it feel special. And then in college, I met a lot of good friends even that I have till this day through dance, and that was just a fun time, like just this sort of recreational activity that we would all enjoy. Like, again, there's not a big scene like you have in California, but you just need a couple people to like get down with, and that's it, right? So
yeah, 100%. And then you found your way anyway to California. So
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about that? How,
Yeah.
how did that end up? How did you end up deciding to move here? And then what were the leading factors to that?
Sure. So Syracuse has, I think, still an LA program. So I did my last semester of Syracuse in LA. And again, the reasoning, like just thinking about everything I was into, is out here. Like the whole entertainment industry, dance, design, film, like all these things are, this is where it happens.
Yeah.
So I just knew I needed to see it for myself. And that program really helped me like dip my toes in the water, so to speak, and get a little more sense of like what life is like here and the things that take place. And yeah, I applied, no, not even applied, like this, I got an internship at World of Dance, and that was my first step into like professionally doing this stuff.
How did that end up happening? How did you end up getting the internship?
I went to an event called World of Dance Awards.
Awards?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was like their awards show.
Oh.
This is in 2012. I think it was still fairly new at that point. And I arrived early because like I just assumed driving around LA would take me forever. And it took a long time, but I still got there early.
Okay.
And I didn't know where to go, right? Like I'm new, so I just waited in line. Like there's no line. I'm just like the only one standing outside.
Everyone else is on B-boy time?
Yeah. I think I was like over an hour early.
Oh, damn,
And
okay.
the guy who was running the website at the time walked out. His name is Calvin, and he was like, "What are you doing here? Like, do you work with a publication?" Because I had my camera on me. It's like a Canon T2i or something.
Hey, okay.
And I was like, "No, I just came to watch the show, and I'm just early." And so he asked if I would like to shoot for them that night. And granted, at this point, I'm still fairly inexperienced. But I just saw it as a potential opportunity. So I took it, and I think overnight I turned around, edited photos and an edited video, like a recap video of the event.
Wow.
And sent it to them by that morning.
Dang.
Again, like not knowing if anything would come of it, but it's like just the feeling of maybe I should like try to make something of this.
Yeah.
Like, just see where it goes. Because if you don't put in the effort, you'll never know. So that, I think that alone, like showing that initiative, got me this internship that didn't exist. Like it's not like they had a position
No.
open, but I think seeing that made them think, okay, maybe this kid has something to offer. So that's all it was.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, I mean, people might say like, oh, like you got lucky because they handed it to you, but when luck and opportunity falls into your lap, it's up to you to make the decision. Not everybody who was given that opportunity would have stayed up all night. I mean, I know how it is, like editing a recap video and turning over like multiple photos for the event, when like this isn't even something that you were prepared to do the day of. You just kind of did it. So that's pretty amazing to hear. Where that and is that like, I want to dive a little bit more deeper into that ethic of yours. I'm not sure if that's something that you've done in the past, or I'm sure it didn't come out of nowhere. It's not like you decided to start working hard at that moment, So I guess, yeah. What do you think? Were you looking for work at that time? Or were you looking for a job? Or like when this opportunity came to you, why did you decide to go so ham on it?
I was not really looking for a job because the Syracuse program requires you to have an internship.
Okay.
And I already had one.
Oh, you had one?
Yeah. So I was not even sure like if I could realistically add this to my plate, but I knew of this company. I'd seen the show on YouTube, you know what I mean? I mean, at this point it wasn't a TV show, it was like,
Right.
it was a live event show, but the performances would be posted on YouTube. So that's how I knew of it. I knew the dancers that performed at it, and I just felt like I should go for this because all of my interests and skill sets sort of aligned somewhere in this range. So I think that's what it was, like realizing that maybe there's a place for me, maybe something can come of like this sort of weird mixture of interests in this particular space.
Yeah, wow, okay. Got it. So it clicked with you. You're like, okay, yeah, maybe there's something come from it.
Yeah.
Essentially. Got it. So then you do that. They give you an internship position, and at some point you end up working your way up, right? So then what happens? How long are you with roller dance, and then where's the next step after that?
It was fairly quick. Not because I was like amazing. Is really just because the company was actually so small at the time, and pretty soon I found myself in charge of pretty much all of the media, so shooting and editing video, photo, some design work, and working with like a lot of these notable dancers in the scene. So I worked with them through 2014. Yeah, something like that.
Okay, so you end up going up there, and then at some point, okay, up to 2014. So what makes you decide to move on? What is that catalyst? Because I know around this 2014, 13, 12 time, something's brewing, right? And it has a lot to do with where we're sitting right now. So exactly what falls into your lap, if it does, or what are the opportunities or things that are presented this time, whether it be meeting, I don't know, the people who may have also helped you come up with this. Yeah.
So part of it is like throughout this whole time, like 2012 to 2014, I've also been working with a lot of these dancers on the like personal shoots and stuff like that, and I'm developing my skill set through this time, having a better understanding of I guess how I would shoot things or approach things creatively, and Anthony was one of the first people I worked with, Anthony Lee, and I think we just hit this sweet spot of like in our careers at the right time, meeting each other at the in the right kind of headspace. He was sort of like considering at that time whether or not to fully commit himself to dance, and 2014, I think he and Mike Song, like, they're really thinking about what's the next step, because they have at that point been sort of traveling and teaching individually, and there's a lot of people sort of in that generation that were doing that. But I think the questions about like longevity and lifestyle start to enter like your headspace, like what's the long game? Because that didn't feel like a long game. Definitely. And then realizing the strength of like bringing individuals together, and Kinjaz had existed in a sense since 2010 in a way, but more so as like a for fun, like college-based group of friends.
It was like just for fun, right? Yeah.
So I think the switch started to turn in terms of like considering it as a potential business, and what are the ways that we can elevate everything if we work together.
Okay.
So it really stemmed from a conversation with myself, Anthony, and Mike, but the team grew very quickly from there. And personally, I felt like there's a lot of alignment in who we are as people, where we were at that point in time, artistically, culturally, the things that tie us together. There's like a lot of, a lot of overlap in, I think, the way we were brought up to creatively what we're into, everything, music, fashion, art, pop culture type
you guys
stuff.
Clicked in a lot of ways, right?
And that was refreshing. Not that it didn't happen at World of Dance, but World of Dance is such a wide gamut, right? And it represents a lot of people. And I think it just never felt like my thing. Not that it should. It's just like this was someone else's thing.
It's, I see what you mean.
Right.
Yeah.
So
and now you have the opportunity to really like push something that you can really be a part of, right?
Yeah, something that maybe feels a little closer to me, and like people that I already had enjoyed working with up till that point. And the mentality of this sort of collective coming together that stemmed from Kinjaz also was brought into like the Vibrvncy team. Yeah, so and the whole development of that.
Right. So what were those like earlier talks like? Because now looking back in hindsight, it's like, oh yeah, it makes sense. Like this exists, right? Like of course it works. But then back then, and still honestly, it's pretty unprecedented to hear a group of dancers, especially before this, to come together and build a entity, a company, you know, that can be sustainable in so many different ways besides just performing, right? Like you said, that's what most dancers, that was the reality back then, right? Like you become really famous, and then or you get a good following, you get flown out and you teach, and that was like one of your main forms of income. But now you guys are like, I don't know how sustainable that is long term. So what were those earlier talks like, and how did you guys begin to formulate how this is going to work back then?
Yeah, so back then, I think our scope was still fairly limited. We just knew that collectively we could do things that are not really possible if we're just trying to run by ourselves. And bringing together different skill sets, obviously, like from my perspective as like a designer, photographer, videographer, that brings something to Mike and Anthony that they can't do without me. They're doing all sorts of artistry that I can't do without them. And that's multiplied every time someone new is brought into the fold. So, it hasn't really changed. It's just like, I think the scope gets bigger when new people are introduced, or like when sort of new connections are made. And the earliest sort of periphery sort of things were, merchandising. So like selling some t-shirts, you know. And the earliest tasks were just like shooting videos, because that was what brought like relevancy to what we were doing and who we were, and helped to connect some dots. And we still use that as a strategy to this day, creating content that hopefully resonates with people, and not just people that are our fans, but like hopefully more than that. And we ideally should be able to cater to different people, different audiences, to widen that scope again.
Right. Yeah. It's now that we're looking at it and what it's become, I want to touch on this later, but I'll bring it up just now so we put a pin in it. But you mentioned like the half step concept, right, in the earlier podcast. I think that really fits into what you're talking about now. But before we move on, I know that at the very beginning stages, like when you guys were selling shirts and such, there was like a cross country tour that you guys did together, right?
Yeah.
So I've heard from you guys offhandedly like that happened, right? But kind of want to go deeper into that, because it was a while, right? You guys were on the road for a while, and I'm not sure who was there. It was Mike, Anthony, you, Nick. I don't know if there's maybe more people, but I kind of want to, like, if you have any, were there any events or turning points or or things that happened during that trip? And how long were you guys on the road? What did you guys gain from that, do you think?
Yeah. That was at the very beginning. So like that's right after I left my position at World of Dance, and Mike and Ant were like, we should really like set aside time for each other and try to start figuring this out, because it's not going to be easy. Obviously, we're diving into something new.
Yeah.
And they suggested a cross-country road trip, and it took us like 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, and we kind of zigzagged. It's not like it really actually takes that long, but they sort of set it up to where they had workshops in different cities, and we kind of planned out the pathway based on that.
Okay.
But really, it was the main focus was to set aside time and spend it with each other to formulate strategy around how to build what we want to build as a business, and how to work together best. And that started with myself, Anthony, Mike, and Nick Kim, who was my intern at World of Dance prior to that.
Got you.
So he sort of, I guess, followed me.
Yeah, he just kind of, tagged along.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And it was great. I mean, I think you gain a lot of like mutual understanding about each other, spending like literally 2 weeks straight in a minivan.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you just don't have a choice.
Yeah.
But it was a really great experience. And I think really sort of crucial at that time, because even though we had sort of worked together a lot by that point, to sort of understand each other at that level is a little bit different, and definitely gave us, you know, the time to really consider so many different things into a very pivotal time in our lives that we were sort of committing to each other in a way. And on that same trip, we met Ben and Sean Evaristo, sort of towards like the second or third quarter of it. And yeah, so Ben sort of like joined shortly after that trip as well.
Right. So yeah, I mean, you guys met many crucial members today, right, through that one trip, and you really took the time and dedicated a leg of time in order to make this happen. Because it's like you said, I can see the benefit definitely. Like now looking at it, just you wouldn't have been able to bond or connect or talk if you hadn't taken that leap, right? I mean, you quit your job, and those guys, I'm sure it's not easy for 20-somethings who are supposed to be in the workforce to kind of just to go for that, right?
Yeah, it was daunting for sure.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, it just sounds like a great time and worth it, right? But in order to take that leap, it does take a little bit of courage. So yeah, that was great. I'm glad you guys did that. Okay, so I want to touch on, I guess, a few leaps and bounds, if you could call those that, for Kinjaz. I forgot what year it was, but you guys began to appear on TV shows. So those are, I'm pretty sure, helped a good amount in its own ways. And then even later contact with China, like let's say after the road trip, like what was like the next big move for you guys? What did you guys decide from that road trip? What were you guys gonna do from there?
So I think, that time, the TV shows did happen, I think, fairly shortly, maybe 2015, I think, ABDC. But sort of post-road trip, it was really sort of building, right? Whether it was like creating content or I guess it was that, like, but with different members, and starting to really try to showcase and highlight these sort of like group efforts, because people hadn't necessarily seen that before in the way that we were presenting things. And alongside it, building the brand in the sense of like the imagery of it, and whether that was like logos or the merchandise we started to roll out. Still very basic stuff in a way, but I think even at that point, like there weren't a lot of other people doing it the way we were thinking about things. So yeah, that did lead up to ABDC, and we were on this season that was like everyone else was a past winner.
Right. Yeah. You guys were like.
So
yeah. So how did that opportunity end up presenting itself? Do you remember?
I don't really. I feel like it was probably just like a email to the booking or whatever, or maybe some like a Napoleon or something hit up Mike and Anthony. But it was definitely like, wow, we're being invited onto this.
Right.
Like,
and that was probably because of what you guys were doing for yourselves at that point, because it's not like you were just being handed down. There were things that were, like you said, you were creating content, right? So
right. And I mean, we definitely have members that were alumni on the show from different crews.
That's
so
true
I
too.
think that's a unique thing too. But we're like, wow, we're getting invited onto this sort of season of champions situation, and that was a sort of an eye opener, and definitely a blessing in some ways. Television it can be challenging, and you have to sort of I think the pros are not obvious off the bat. They're not what you think they are.
Really?
Yeah.
The pros are not obvious for television?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
reality TV is a certain kind of animal, and there's definitely ways to gain from it. You just have to be mindful of what those actually are versus what they might appear to be.
Whoa. Okay. All right. So I guess from like your guys' personal experience, I don't know if you're allowed to talk. I don't know if you want or if you're allowed to talk about that. But if there is anything like that you have for people who may be faced with that situation in the future, in the past, if you have any specifics, you don't have to give an example as a personal, but just what are some of these things you're talking about in terms of being wary, being mindful?
There's a lot of things that come into play where you might not really be in full control of your own artistry, and there's compromises that take place, and at the end of the day, like, if you believe in what you're doing, the best thing you can do for yourself is just try to stay as close to your artistry as you can. Like, there's compromises that will happen no matter what. But if you do something that you don't really want to do, or you don't really want to be represented this way, but you feel like you should for the sake of the show, like you might do better, I think there's more likely going to be regret if you do that versus just staying true to what you really believe in or what you really want to do.
That makes sense. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, it's I mean, it's like you said, it's a whole conglomerate, and so in the end of the day, it is a production, and it's not just your production, right? So there's going to be times, and I don't think this is exclusive to television probably, but just working with bigger entities, right? Is that they're gonna want to shape you and mold you, right, in ways that maybe you wouldn't necessarily want if it was just your own production, right? So it's just a matter of being as integral to yourself as you can, essentially, right? Okay, that makes sense. Speaking of that, and we'll switch gears now. A lot of, and I hope you'll allow me to toot your horn for a little bit, just because I know you don't get the spotlight a lot of times, but it's just funny because when people see Kinjaz, I don't think a lot of not as many people will know like who Jon Shih is as maybe Mike or Anthony, but the armor and the accessories and the graphics and the visual language of Kinjaz is almost like, at least I know from the beginning and still through now, it's your baby a lot of the time, right? like from the logos to the visual effects to the freaking complex that we're sitting in. You know, I can't. When you told me that you designed or you helped design or you headed it, designing like Shanghai and the complex and all these crazy places, I couldn't believe it, man. Like, you are a testament to someone who doesn't allow a medium to box them in. And yeah, I mean, just wanted to acknowledge you for that first of all, which is
Thanks,
insane.
man.
Yeah, of
It means
course.
a lot.
It's pretty remarkable. But the question I guess I want to ask about that is, like, how do you feel about? Okay, first I wanted to ask you, because you do all of these different things, and I feel like most people can spend a lifetime doing one. So, what are your opinions on specialization? So I know that's something that I'm sure that maybe crosses your mind once in a while. I know it does for myself, but people, especially in today's world, and not even in today's world, like I see it even on set. You know, when we're on a filmmaking set, people are invited because they're good at lighting or they're good at gaffing. You know, they're the gaffer, they're the DP, right? They have a role that they're really good at. So that being said, how has your mentality been towards this idea, right? Because you have clearly decided that you're not going to be constrained to one thing, but I'm sure you wrestle sometimes, like, maybe I should have focused
absolutely.
completely on that. So how do you see that, and what do you think about people who want to do more but also want to be really good at one thing?
Yeah, I think that it's there's definitely pros and cons to both. And personally, I just feel like I'm just naturally interested in all these things, and sort of design as a holistic kind of mentality, where it's not because I'm great at all these things, but I am interested in all these avenues, and that by itself makes me feel limited if I only approach one. And it's tough because I think that has sort of limited my opportunities in ways, because I don't think I'm great at any one thing, but I have sort of like a unique arsenal of things that I know enough about a bunch of things that it becomes powerful as a package, I guess. And I think there's definitely people that thrive at specialization, and that's amazing. Even within our own team, there's some people that are more so specialists than I guess what I do, and that's important. And I have the luxury of my position because I have specialists, in a way, right? And yeah, I think my sort of ideal world is like where I know enough about all this sort of like little or different areas. So whether, I mean, I've never designed an interior before. I designed, I mean, the first one was the Dojo in Monterey Park.
Yeah. So okay, let's touch on that, just because it's not like you went to school for interior design,
Right?
And all of a sudden, like, this opportunity presents itself. So you guys could have hired someone to just do it for you, right? And I'm sure most people, like, who don't have experience, that's what they would probably naturally do. But what was going through your head in terms of, like, this opportunities here? So was that ever a consideration to hire somebody, or how exactly do you remember?
I'm sure it was, but I'm also sure that we had very severe sort of budgetary constraint.
Okay, right.
And again, I just have the interest, and I have general sort of design principles in my head that can, carry some weight in terms of, like, if you're trying this for the first time. I'm not starting from nothing. I have a little bit of something that's related,
Right.
and
That's true.
thankfully that was enough. I mean, it still took me a lot of sort of like more research and learning things on the fly, and you have to be willing to put in that time and energy to be successful, I think. But yeah, that's I think Dojo Monterey Park was like the baby step, and then it was Dojo Chengdu.
Oh,
So that was the
that was
big
the second
jump.
one.
That was the second one.
Okay, so I have had the privilege of visiting the dojo in Chengdu, and I'll try to paint a picture in people's heads of the place. Literally, okay, so I met Chad, and he took us to Chengdu dojo while I was on a layover. We just happened to meet him on the plane. It was super random.
That's crazy.
I don't understand how this world works. Life is crazy, but on my 3 or 4 hour layover, they drove me over there, and I was able to go inside, and I was like, oh, like Kinjaz Dojo Monterey, like it's nice, like it's well done, but the space is probably the size of a like a Starbucks coffee shop with a second floor. I'd say maybe a little bit bigger, especially like the upstairs, like a dance studio plus a Starbucks coffee shop. So I'm like, it's probably gonna be the same.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I step inside, it's like a freaking mini village in there. It's crazy. You go inside and it looks so futuristic. Not something that you typically see in America. That you even have like this whole panoramic view of like the city. Chad called it Wakanda. Like if you ever watched Black Panther, it looked kind of like the King's Lair. It's freaking dope.
Yeah.
And then he told me that like you're kind of right. The way he worded it was, you're currently inside the mind of Jon Shih. That's what he said. And I'm just like, at this point, I haven't talked to you, I haven't known you, but dude, I'd already been following you for a while. I'm just like, this guy is like, where does it end? Where does the creativity end? So that was your second project. Wow.
Second.
All right.
Yeah. So like spatial design. Yeah.
All right. I mean, what was that like? What was the process of putting that together?
Daunting, for sure. And I think that I do sort of start with a very practical approach and look at what are the parameters, right? And if you think about it, having been there, it's sort of an odd shape. It's like a weird like arc, and there's a bunch of pillars, like structural pillars that you can't move, so you sort of have to work around it. So the very first thing is like, okay, it's a dance studio. Where do the dance rooms go?
Right. That makes sense.
And then it's sort of, if that's sort of the bare bones, what can we do to build around it? And then, at that point, I was really considering things like how do we stand apart? How do we make this different as an experience for people when they walk in the door? Like, I want them to feel like they're somewhere else. I want to feel like they're in the Kinjaz universe. And thankfully, working with Sinosage, they're amazing partners. They've been very supportive of sort of like these crazy creative ideas, and they were able to see it through. It's like really deliver on this sort of, like you said, like futuristic. The other sort of like image in my head was really like, what does it feel like to walk down the street in Tokyo or in Hong Kong, and how do we bring that element of it inside? And there is sort of this panoramic glass all the way down the length of the studio, and so it does feel almost like you're outside in the city. You're surrounded by the cityscape that has been building even since you went. There's been more development since then, and I was really inspired by like sort of like cyberpunk aesthetics and things like that, and sort of this mashup of like old and new. So there's definitely traditional architectural themes from like Chinese and Japanese architecture, but then like modernized through materials and through sort of like the presentation as a whole, because I feel like that is also representative of Kinjaz in a way, as modern Asian American predominantly, and sort of these thematic themes that like are cross generational sort of cultural motifs, and can be represented through architecture, through music, through things like that, that we also like to kind of bend, you know.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I can see where through your explanation, I can see where having that principle, foundational understanding of design comes from or works, right? Because it's like you said, the first problem or issue or thing you have to address is it's a dance studio, right? So fundamentally, let's take care of those first.
Yeah.
And then
Just get it out of the way.
Right. Yeah. And so you have those, but then that's like your leading lines, right? So it's not like you're starting from scratch. You have the prompts, and then you have really strong vision of like maybe potentially right like old with new, and then making it look like it's like you're like inside is outside, like a whole city. That was really impressive because that's exactly how it felt like when I was walking through the halls, and then just seeing the scape and also integrating the things that you're interested in and being embracing of that. You know, I really respect that part of you guys as well, because I mean currently we're sitting in the Vibrvncy office, which is a loft, which is crazy too, you know, but on its own. But there's like figures and helmets. There's a Mandalorian helmet right there. Yeah, there's more helmets over there. There's toys. There's figurines. So, I mean, that's also really cool. I feel like that's not something that most adults will continue to embrace and
yeah,
pursue.
I'm just still a kid.
There you go. Yeah, I think that's a really important part, though, right?
I think it's important to surround yourself with people, things that creatively inspire you. If you work in a creative field, I think that, I mean, it feels different, right? When you're surrounded by that. And again, like what we want people who experience any of our spaces to walk away from feeling is like that feels like something special, like whether it's just different or whether it's something they also resonate with. They can identify it as like Kinjaz, Vibrvncy. That's what that looks and feels like.
That's awesome. Okay, this is gonna be, I mean, I hope it helps the audience as well, but this is a question I just want to throw out for myself. So the first time I met you, it was in Shanghai Disneyland, right? Which is also kind of crazy because he just happened to be there. Again, people just happened to be there, and I was studying abroad there, and then we saw you guys. So when you're in places like that, because you were mentioning you want to give them this experience, you want to take them into a whole new world, and I feel like places like that do a really great job of doing that.
For sure.
So when you go to places like that, is your brain on and like kind of looking at these things ever? Like,
yeah.
Okay.
And
so
honestly, that happens sort of everywhere. I think also like if you're in film or photography, for example, you can't like watch a movie without thinking about the composition or the color grading or whatever. Like,
that's true.
It's sometimes hard to like enjoy something and not like super analyze it, but that is sort of where I think you can draw a lot of creativity from, is if you are open to allowing yourself to experience things in that way, where you are actively thinking about why is this shaped this way, why is this placed here, you know, like in sort of any experience, whether it's a Starbucks or whether it's Shanghai Disneyland.
Right. Either or. Yeah. Just anywhere, huh? Oh, okay. Yeah, really asking that question why, and allowing yourself to learn from your experiences. That's really special. Okay. So then on the flip side of that coin, now I want to ask you about your like the process essentially, and specifically about the process, because you do so many things. Like you said, we mentioned earlier before this podcast, you currently have a deal with some retailers in Japan where you're creating apparel for Kinjaz under Kinjaz, and like it's selling in stores in Japan, which is already pretty amazing. But the quota is 15 shirts a month right? So that's
More or
one
less,
shirt every 2 days.
Yeah.
On top of everything you're already doing, which is creative directing for Vibrvncy, creating films, doing visual effects. I saw those 13 projects for the Scots. Like these are things you're doing on top of all of this.
Yeah.
So one thing is, it's not like you have any more hours in a day than anybody else. The first question I have is, on a scale of 0 to 10, how much of a perfectionist do you think you are?
I think like a 9.
Really?
Yeah.
What? How do you even... Okay, so I was expecting the number to be low because I don't understand how it's possible you're whipping out all this stuff.
Yeah, I think
while
you just
still
have to
having
be
it.
selective about it,
Okay.
because I think I'm the type of person that if I don't feel like I can fully commit to something, I'd rather not take it.
I see.
I'd rather not, put out something less than what I'm capable of. And I actually feel like a lot of people in our circle are sort of the same way, and that pushes everyone to like push a little harder. You know what I mean? So I think it's good in that sense that I'm surrounded by people that are supportive of a mentality like that does put certain pressure on each other in a way to deliver at a high level. But that's how we can succeed, right? That's how we can stand out.
That's true. That's just pretty remarkable because that makes sense. So you're pretty selective of what you decide to commit yourself to, first of all, even though it's still a lot of things. But and in a world, and I know this is something that you've wrestled with, because in a world where it seems like when we look at how social media is designed, essentially, right? Frequency is very important. The amount of times you post, algorithmically, can often favor the level of quality. And I know that's something that
we're terrible
at quantity, right?
Yeah, we're the worst.
And it's unfortunate because it shouldn't be like that, right? Because that requires, if you're gonna be more frequent, it doesn't require, but the price you pay might have to be for quality, right? And that is something that I can see now from what you said, has to be something that doesn't have to be sacrificed, but you have to prioritize, right?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's something that is a hard decision all the time, because there is definitely value in social media, and it's hard to it's a balance, right? Because to some extent, if you look at our Vibrvncy Instagram, there's weeks that go by that we don't post anything. And when we do post, it's 3 things at a time. They all line up. They all more or less follow sort of like the color palette of the thing before. It's not easy to keep up with that in ways that like are relevant to whatever's happening right now. We're always doing stuff, but it's not always reflected in the feed. And I think we just consider the feed as more of like a portfolio, and when we have a potential client, it's like, here, this is what our stuff looks like, rather than trying to keep up with the day-to-day social media, which is very detrimental if you're trying to build numbers. So I don't recommend this to anybody. But like, it allows us to preserve the look and feel of our Instagram in a way that hopefully has some value in it too. That's a little bit different. And so that you're totally right. That's definitely a sacrifice in many ways.
I wouldn't go to say as far that you guys are terrible though. Like, especially with your personal feed, you are posting multiple times a week, and those posts are, and sometimes, but those posts are, they're high quality, and it's like you said, just based per your personality. You're gonna be working on that for a while. Like we're surrounded by these fragment dolls, so there's one right there, but I remember you're doing some illustrations on Illustrator and stuff like that, little art pieces or different random things, but and the same principle when you guys have to whip out 15 shirts a month. It's possible to do both, right? But it's maybe the key is like what you said is being selective of what you decide to choose.
Yeah, like my feed or my following on Instagram, I think hasn't changed really in over a year. um, and I don't know. I partially like I don't care that much. Partially, I wish like collectively everything we do, the artistry could be represented with higher numbers. Obviously, that can come with like more profitability in different gigs and such. Unfortunately, there are like clients that have essentially turned us down because our following numbers weren't high enough. And so they're definitely looking at numbers, following, and viewership as a metric for value, where ideally, for us, ideally, that should come from the quality of the work. And so there's sort of a disconnect there that makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable in terms of like how social media works, but that's how the world is. You either choose to play the game or you don't. And so, yeah, we're just, figuring that line out for ourselves.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a forfeit. I think it's something that it's weird because art, it's such a strange relationship that art has with social media. Because social media is essentially like its own thing. You can, I don't want to bag on anybody out there, but like people who know how to do social media and they put more time into that versus their art are able to perform exponentially better than those who prioritize their art over social media, right? So I think you guys are an example of that kind of case where the arts is the priority, right? So we can talk more about that in another time. But okay, we'll wrap up soon. But I think one thing I wanted to ask is also just because you're doing so many things and I know this is a human trait like wide. So burnout, right? So how when it hits you, how do you like to deal with it?
Yeah.
And I don't know, have you had any cases of burnout in recent times?
Yeah, sure. I think for me, it happens when there's like 20 things going on, and like it's almost paralyzing. Like if you have to think about fixing 20 problems at the same time, you can't even fix one.
Like a mountain, right?
Yeah, you just have to choose to like let go of something to grab onto something else, right? So and that can be difficult in itself because maybe you don't want to let this go. You feel like you should, push through, but if it's not working, it's not working. You just gotta like cut the loss, so to speak, and focus on something else. Once that's done, maybe you go back to the previous thing. And yeah, it's hard, right? I don't think there's an easy answer to that. I think all creatives go through it. And I think
when you personally in the sense of burnout where you just don't have that same passion that you feel like for normally, what are some of the things you like to do in terms of, I don't know if you go elsewhere and take your
for inspiration.
Yeah.
I do think I'm lucky in the sense that I do get inspired by sort of a range of different things, and it's sort of random, right? So it's hard to pick one, but I do really get inspired by looking at other forms of art and people that specialize in different things, whether it's like prop making or like an illustrator or a 3D artist or an architect. So if you look at my Instagram, what is it, like the like page or whatever, you'll see like all sorts of different artists and different creatives. So I don't know. I guess I always like save their posts, right? And part of it is like maybe I'll come back to this someday and it'll inspire me to do something or to think about something in a certain different way that I haven't done yet.
Yeah.
And I recently rewatched the whole Netflix Abstract series.
Oh, yeah, it's a great one.
Yeah, I watched it all a long time ago,
Yeah.
but just going through all of that again was really refreshing because they really do feature a lot of amazing creative people, and what they have to say is really great. So
That's a great one, yeah. That's definitely a huge inspiration of, well, I'm sure for designers far and wide, but I don't know, definitely for this show, and you're definitely one of the first people that popped into mind when I saw the show. I'm like, dude, he'd love this. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm glad you watched it. Okay.
for sure.
Yeah, it's. I think we'll wrap up now. It's honestly, John, this has been super great. The last thing I wanted to ask you is just about. So I remember in the last, if you listen to the podcast with John and Gerald on the Kinjaz podcast, it's a really great one. I would check that out. That was what I used as preface. But you mentioned that you guys have come a long way since you first started. A lot of things have been accomplished and a lot of things have been built. And so while success is like it's relative and it's subjective, right? And who's to say like you can't always feel successful? You should to a degree feel like you're doing something right, right? But maybe in terms of how about after this is all done, right? Because at some point you gotta leave it all behind and you gotta leave a legacy, right? So what do you think? And this is a deep question, so you can think about it. But how do you want to be remembered? What are the things that you want people to remember you by, and what are the impacts that you want to make on the world in the long term?
Sure. Oh man. Well, collectively, if you do watch that podcast or listen to it, we do talk about this thing we call the half-step concept,
Right.
and I am hopeful that that is part of the legacy we can leave, whether it's to dancers or other creatives, is like bridging the gaps between these creative mediums and creative artists. There's, to me, a lot of still unexplored territory, and I think we've been very sort of aggressive about exploring these different things as much as possible, but we're not going to be the only ones, like there should be more that follow, and they can definitely pave their own way through all this stuff. And I mean, I get excited when I get to connect with a visual artist, like in Japan, connect him somehow to like some, like the arcade machine downstairs, and bring that into like a choreography video that the guys are working on. So it's, I don't know, just things like that maybe other people aren't really thinking about. I don't know if I don't think the goal is like my legacy, but I think that hopefully a lasting impact of whatever we're doing here as the collective of Kinjaz and Vibrvncy will benefit dancers and creatives down the line, just in terms of expanding the horizons beyond like what has been typically understood as a dancer's career path.
Right.
Yeah.
Got you. I love it. And I think that's something that is something you guys are already putting into practice today. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, just before we close up, John, I want to acknowledge you. And you said that we mentioned the idea of specialization, and also there's this whole saying like jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's necessarily has to be true, right? I think you can be a jack of all trades and a master of few.
Yeah.
And I also think that maybe from an outside perspective, I want to let you know that I'm sure you're looking up to a lot of heroes that are like, that you have to look up to, and that you compare yourself to sometimes from time to time. But from the perspective of somebody who started breaking, and saw the same future in reality. Like I don't know if I can make a career out of dance. Like when I saw you guys and what you're doing, regardless of like if it's making like financial sense or not, it's making an impact on the world, and therefore eventually will be able to be sustainable. Just the stuff that you have been creating, like visually, graphically, film wise, seeing how you've been able to do all of these things has been extremely inspiring since probably like end of high school, and I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, man. Like your stuff, I think, is greater than you might give yourself credit for, you know. And I don't want. I know you're not gonna get cocky because you're a super humble guy, but I just wanted to let you know that. And the whole point of the Crossroads is to show people that these things are possible, right? Like that there are people out here that exist that are doing the most, and they're doing things that you may not know are even feasible. And yeah, keep doing the thing, man. I appreciate you. And you were the person that actually inspired me to start this. I don't know if you remember.
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember me coming into your house, and I was like, yo, like I want to interview you. I want to do something. It's been a year, and we've had some pretty incredible people on, but I'm glad it finally came full circle.
Dude, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, it's been an absolute honor, and I mean, maybe till next time, you know?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Heck yeah, man. Okay, well, yeah, guys, I think, okay, well, make sure you follow Jon, first of all. Jon Shih, 21, correct? JYSHIH 21 on Instagram. Follow Vibrvncy with a V as the A, and Kinjaz, right? And keep updated, and yeah, you guys keep it up. Push yourself. Don't have to limit yourself, and this guy has proved that. So until next time, signing out.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Peace. What is up, you guys? It's Kai again. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Crossroads. Your listenership makes all this work worth it. Please don't forget to follow us on Instagram at @thecrossroadz_, or visit us at anchor.fm/crossroads. There, you can leave a voice message or questions for future episodes. And if you really enjoy the content, you can even become an Anchor supporter. By donating a small monthly fee, whether that be $1 or $5 a month, we will give you a shout out on all future episodes of The Crossroads. And if you're short on cash and can't donate, no worries, we feel you. You can still support the show in the best way possible by sharing The Crossroads with a friend. That way you will not only be supporting us by bringing us new, valuable listenership, but by helping your friends gain new knowledge. Hope to hear from you soon, you guys. Take care. Till next time.